Is geo really new, or is it just kind of a repackaging, renaming of some of the meaningful yet maybe a little bit tired metrics that we're used to? And I'm going to give this question to Matt first.
It's a good question because I thought you were going to come to me first. I think we're still in that kind of early stages right now. I think, there's a lot of potential for GEO and AI visibility and the value that can bring within our measurement frameworks if we use it correctly. So if it's used as a supplementary metric alongside other things as we build out our frameworks to demonstrate value, I think I'm probably not alone on this panel to be skeptical about its use as kind of like a silver bullet measurement. And I think if we use it in an irresponsible way, there's a potential for it to be almost another AVE, not to be too controversial. I'm going in hard early. But I think we all in this room understand the potential for AI and GEO in the long term, but I think there's still a lot of kind of discovery to be had before we reach the stage of kind of it being the hero metric or the hero measurement.
Thanks for identifying AV as the cockroach of our industry, and that even through new technology, new industry, it will find a way to survive. So well done on that, Matt. Thank you so much. Michael?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think one of the interesting things with the geo stuff in particular is I think it's maybe one of the first times that we're starting to shift from just purely counting things to like contextualizing measurement in a little bit of a different way and thinking more about the predictive elements or the model building rather than saying, hey, we've collected everything that we can find and we've counted it and then we have this like view of the past. And I think that for me is quite an interesting and exciting part of what's coming up. Totally agree with Matt in terms of we want to take that with a giant pinch of salt. It's early days, right? I think nothing's really tracked fully yet, but I think there's a lot of potential, and I think there's the reality of we need to be just trying to stay ahead of the curve when we have audience behaviors changing, and we're already seeing that in academic research showing that the changes are coming, but I think it's way too early to say it's the silver bullet's the be-all and end-all. And I think, as people have already been saying today, I think we don't want to lean too heavily on a single data point anyway. It's going to be part of a touch point, a very complex ecosystem that audiences are interacting with. So don't lean too heavily on any single one, I would say.
Right, and I think that's the really powerful piece, right? Being able to identify trends and correlation of other things to be able to reach out and get those insights to that piece of it. Giuseppe, I'm going to switch up the question slightly to go to you. You're welcome. When, obviously at Ketchum, I think when you're working with the data and working with clients, what are some of those preliminary pieces that you're doing to qualify that as you guys look at, the AI models to be able to give them better value from the data?
Definitely. I mean, obviously there are a number of tools that are coming into the market at this point. Some of the software providers are in the room with us today. Obviously, there are concerns about how truthful those metrics are at this point in time, where we don't have user-generated prompts, right? We are creating prompts ourselves in a synthetic way, kind of trying to anticipate what consumers might ask. And there are some uses to it, but I know the panel shares the same concerns with me. And if you do, I think there are some practical things that you can do today to implement AI measurement into your mix. Because if we think about the biggest way generative AI is impacting our work is how consumers discover information, right? And if we look into it, really Google is still has a major advantage in that. When we talk about ChatGPT, Perplexity, Claude, and all the others, Copilot, kind of disrupting the discovery journey, we need to understand that Google is still 90% of the market share. Well, actually, it's 89%. That's why we are saying there is that switch. So it's not. I'm not trying to diminish that. It's still a significant change, and obviously we talk a lot about Gen Zs and how they use other channels to search. But Google still has the lion's share. So if I have to suggest where to start and where we are starting, is by using Google Console and looking at AI overviews, because you get probably the best data at this point in time. Because Google Console shows you when an AI overview has been shown to consumers, and then from there you can derive a lot of metrics. One of them, obviously, you can see whether the number of citations, which sources have been cited, and if you're tracking your media coverage or PR media coverage or earned media coverage, you can kind of cross-reference that and see kind of the results that you're getting. So Google search is where zero-click is happening at scale. So that's where I will start. And another thing that I want to probably raise for the panel as well, and what we are looking at, is the time frame that we are looking at. Because I think LLMs are changing a little bit the way we're going to consider impact, or the longevity of the impact. The way LLMs build entity understanding, which is compounded over time. It's different from before, where you will hit a headline and it will live on the web for a certain period of time. Now LLMs, you can have, if you're a tech client, you can have a headline on Forbes in January, then another one on the Wall Street Journal in March that talks about ransomware, and then you can publish a white paper in June. By July, the compound effect of that, effectively LLM will recognize that company as an authoritative brand that gets constant coverage on major publications, and also as a white paper in a certain way. So those publications, they're going to keep getting mentioned and picked up by LLMs. And if you think about the Forbes mention in January that you get, the headline that you get, and you measure only for 30 days, which is what we are doing now, because campaign measurement is mostly done, during, immediately after, or shortly after the campaign, you're only going to see the 5% of the impact. So the compound effect of what the impact of the headlines and everything and all the activities that you're doing is something that we need to start considering. So the measurement journey is going to get a little bit longer, I feel.
James, coming to you, Giuseppe talks about the models, right? So when we're looking at that share of model, what does it tell us and what does it not tell us?
Yeah, so I think, firstly I need to say I'm really pro-geo. I think it's a great thing, but we're in an early stage where a lot of the data is telemetry. It's not really measurement grade, it's not decision grade. And share of model for me is one of those metrics that at the moment, because we don't have a universe of prompt data, that we've really got some very woolly metrics out there. It's one of those things that's useful, it's interesting, it tells us maybe what the machine, if you call it a machine, can tell us, but it doesn't really give us something that's usable from a market or consumer perspective. So it's just one of those metrics that needs to be watched, and I'm assuming, my assumption anyway, is when the advertising model kicks in, there'll be some sort of keyword data, a bit like prompt data, a bit like with Google AdWords, where there will be a universe of data in some way. And then from that, we might be able to extrapolate something a bit more meaningful when it comes to share of model, or maybe the tools and the LMs themselves will give us access to that kind of data to give this kind of analysis. So it's a bit of a flimsy model for me, a metric at the moment for me, but it's an interesting one nonetheless.
So I'll start with you, Michael. When we're talking about the data and data sampling, how are you navigating transparency with the clients about what's included in this to be able to give them confidence in the insights and in some of the guidance that you're providing?
I think this is an easy one. Be transparent. I think it's important. I think like you're already hearing about it today in terms of off-the-shelf models versus trained? Are you using a large language model? Are you going down the more traditional, like NLP route? I think it's important to have those conversations with your clients. I think, particularly us probably up here, we have a duty to also make sure that we're bringing our agencies along and our clients along, because I think one of the biggest gaps is just the understanding piece. I think we heard it earlier as well in terms of the behavior change, and that people can be scared, change is hard, information is difficult. So being transparent is really important, but being transparent in the right way in terms of helping to explain why we're doing things. And I kind of touched on it already, but for me, the biggest shift is all around moving away from counting things and being kind of data informed to having a more nuanced view of the world, like thinking about models of reality, and then being able to talk about those in terms of the predictive way and being more data informed rather than kind of just relying on counting.
Transparency at Hotwire, Matt?
Yeah, always. No, I think it's critical. I think to build off James's point about share of model, I think it's an interesting data point to monitor. But I think when you do so, you have to be upfront about the controlled data set that you're working with. You're not kind of sharing that insight to be like, this is the universal data set within ChatGPT and you rank a certain position. We've built a set of prompts synthetically, as Giuseppe says at the moment, and that's looking at X number of prompts within this certain audience, and this is what we're seeing from a trend perspective, and then repeat that over time and understand kind of trends, what's picking up. But I think if you were to frame that as this is your universal kind of share of model, I think that would be completely misleading. And also you'd be doing ourselves as an agency a disservice, but also kind of giving our clients a false perspective and building false campaigns and programs out of the back of it. So yeah, I think, as Michael says, be transparent.
I'm going to go to you, Giuseppe, because I think, in talking about the synthetic data and the synthetic agents, using them and filling in those gaps, right, that you're trying to identify with, audience and market research. When you're looking at that information, obviously, transparently, of trying to make sure that works, and doing testing, but do you present that, or does your team internally kind of use that with a warning, right? A warning label on all of this data as far as what it does include, so that when people are referencing back to these agents and the synthetic data, that they know some of those pitfalls, some of the baked-in bias. I mean, how are you modeling and testing that across your clients?
I think, as my colleagues here said, like it's all about transparency. I don't think so. When it comes to LLM's experimentation and being upfront with clients always paid off. I mean, like in my career, I've always been upfront. So as long as you run it the way research is run, which is, this is what we've done, this is how we've done it, these are the results, and these are the limitations, that is a good enough framework for me to go in front of clients, as long as you've been thorough. Also, when we talk about prompt synthetic audiences, we need to remember that everything starts with how ethically you built that data set, how rigorous you've been with the data that are into the data set and the quality checks you've done before. But I think the level of scrutiny that we are giving to LLMs and generative search is absolutely founded, but every methodology that I deal with has limitations and dodgy areas, right? So there's always been the case where they're going to be great at certain things and not at other things. And it's just about being honest with ourselves, share the codes openly and being upfront with the client and saying, this is what we've done, these are the limits. As long as you have that, you can build on it, you can critique, you can do things with it. So I think, as my colleagues have said on the panel, it's just about being upfront with the client and that's how we're navigating it at this point in time. I don't think you can do it differently.
James, is the synthetic data a legitimate proxy for research, or is it just kind of a
Yeah.
shortcut for thought leadership or brainstorming?
I think synthetic data can pull its pants on and get out of bed before a market research firm can do. So it has its it has its uses in certain places, certain environments. It's not a substitute for proper data and proper insight, but if you've I think we're all finding in the agency world that clients are coming with more and more unreasonable deadlines for pitches of 5 days, 3 days, tomorrow. There's a time and place for synthetic data, but it's got to be clearly marked up and used in a responsible way.
I want to stay with you for a minute, James, because I think when we're looking at the difference between, UI and API,
Yeah.
and there's that reliability factor, how are you working with how you're accessing the models, and then what does that mean for the reliability of the data quality that you're then trying to make those decisions based on?
So one of the big flaws for people who may or may not understand is that the responses that you get via the API is completely different to the user interface that you use as a user, which creates serious flaws with any sort of measurement model. So actually, one of the big things we're leaning into more is actual brand reputation measurement. Classical measurement is coming to the fore a lot more, because we know where we are with that. We know that if we create the right content, create the right brand reputation, that it will inform eventually the model. So actually, we've spent a lot of time going back to basics, and some of that old school measurement that you might not be as sexy as GEO has really come to the fore too. But the whole UI versus API debate really shows that there's so many holes in tracking what's happening within the black box.
Yeah, I think you kind of have to measure both, right?
Yeah.
Like, you can't just be looking at it from like a single lens, because otherwise you're just missing a huge part of the puzzle. And if you, again, about being transparent with clients, it's about saying we've looked at this through the API of ChatGPT or whatever, knowing that that is going to be different, to James's point, to the UI that people are interacting with. Doesn't mean that it devalues the insight, but it just means that you just have to frame it in a different way, and probably do a comparative analysis of what you see through the UI versus the API.
There's just a lot of people passing off it as facts, as complete science, when it's still, in some respects, telemetry. And as long as we're clear with what the insights tell us, and use it in that way, like a trail of breadcrumbs taking you to a conclusion, then I think that's a responsible way to do it.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of utility in using it as a research tool. And I think that's where we're at right now. Whether or not that then translates into being able to measure true impact, it's just too early to say. But I think you got to be in it to win it, and see what it does. Collect data across a bunch of different data sources. See if you can build up any kind of relationships between their attribution models. Until we're using the data and collecting it and structuring it in the right way, we'll never be able to answer those questions. So I think at this stage, I think there's a lot of use for it, but definitely not as that kind of silver bullet measurement, as we said.
And what does the delineation between useful experimentation and pseudoscience look like? I mean, how are you all then debunking and then proving that within your own organizations?
I mean, I think that it comes back to the transparency piece. Having rigor, having strong hypotheses, like we talk a lot about it with our clients. It's like language we're trying to use more in terms of, what are the hypotheses that we want to test. Having the rigor to test that, making sure that you're using different kinds of experimental models. So that is using different data sets, it's using different types of analysis, leveraging, we work with our behavioral science team as a way of getting a different angle on the data, for example, and then being open and honest when things don't work. I think that's one thing we need to really lean into and just say, we tried this, it didn't work, or we tried this and the results were not what we thought they were going to be. So what does that mean for our strategy or for our planning, whatever that is? But I don't think that's any different from what we've been doing for years. It's just rather than kind of manually doing stuff, we've got technology helping us along the way.
I think that's important to be able to distinguish, right, and discern that the models are learning from the work that's already been done. It's just a matter of validating them, giving different ways to test them, and the speed of which you can test them. So 2 final questions that I would like everybody to answer. You can choose the order of which you would like to answer them. But the first is it time that we redefine what we mean by measurement in the context of generative discovery, right? So when we look at language and the language in the models, is it time that we work on that definition? And extra pressure for the 2 board members here on the stage, but, what role should AMEC play in setting guardrails? Is there a need for an update of the framework we just had the most recent update of the Barcelona principles, of which we incorporated AI and the use cases of AI. But are we talking about kind of a code of transparency for AI? Like what does that look like? And how can we move forward with some actionable takeaways from this panel discussion? James, I will start with you.
Pick on me. Yes, I think as an organisation with my AMEC hat on, we need to take responsibility for what's happening out there in the market and revisit some of the tools that you all rely on a day-to-day basis, and we rely on. Barcelona principles, the framework, the language we use, setting guardrails, policies around transparency. I think AMEC's in a really unique position to help set that agenda, and I think we've all seen the snake oil that's out there on LinkedIn and elsewhere. And being able to bring a bit of reality and transparency and take part in what I see as being like one of the biggest sort of R&D projects taken en masse in the marketing industry. I think AMEC's got a huge role to play in that.
Giuseppe?
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. I think it's absolutely needed to have these open conversations about what's happening, and I think AMEC has a huge opportunity to come out with frameworks that we can all use, and those guardrails, because those are not new issues if you think about it. Of course, you get different results from different LLMs, or if you use UI, or if you prompt directly. But that was always the case with social media listening as well. If you switch provider, I don't know if you have ever done it, there would be like different volumes, and it would be down to how they crawl the data, etc. So I think as long as we are having those open conversations, we have frameworks that we can all share and build upon, I think we can do great things. And I think also it's an opportunity for the PR industry specifically, which back in the days probably lost the SEO train. And now we have another opportunity to go in and lead. And going back to the point of experimentation versus pseudoscience, if we don't do it, the risk that we run is to have all these new metrics coming into the market that are all proprietary, and we don't know how they are calculated. And there are already a bunch of them, like share of model, AI favorability, high visibility. They are all over the place. So I think it's time for us to set that agenda. And going back to your question about whether we need to change what we mean by measurement, I would say probably not. I think we need to change the way we understand the customer journey. What we are measuring and how we are measuring probably stays the same. Probably what we need to do is to have an open mind, though, because one of the mistakes that we can make is to apply old models to LLMs. And I think some of the metrics that we are used to use, they're going to continue, but there's going to be new metrics that we need to develop as part of the journey.
Yeah.
Michael, I'm going to finish with you, Matt.
I agree. I think the simplest answer to the question is it's additive. We've been measuring things for thousands of years. I think we've got some strong frameworks in place. We're not talking about fundamentally changing anything. It's just there's a new source of information, a new source of data. I think, we're just adding to it and evolving and iterating rather than completely redefining. I think that would undermine a lot of good work that's been done for a long time.
Matt?
I was too eager before. No, I would completely agree with what Michael said. I think we've got to the stage where we've got robust measurement frameworks in place, and I think it's just when we analyze the metrics that we're getting or some of the data points that we're getting from AI, it's about building the context around them to show the impact or potential impact to our clients. So, I mean, AMEC always has led the way in responsible and quality measurement, and I think it's got the place to do so in this frame as well. I think although we've all touted, let's kind of take a step back and look at AI responsibly, I think we all acknowledge the opportunity for the industry. So I think AMEC is best positioned to lead the way in kind of let's take that opportunity as an industry, but be responsible and show rigor around it.
And spoiler alert, that was a little bit of a sneaky question because we have two of our three co-chairs of our AI and innovation special interest group in the room who have already been talking about setting up some structure for this. And so before we take the final, we'll take a question from the audience. But if Ant and Thomas would make yourselves known, great. Thanks, guys. So good people to talk to at the coffee break on the back end of this conversation to make sure that as the work that they've already started, that we're being very inclusive of a lot of these concepts and also building this on an agile enough model and discussion plate to be able to be evolving as we need that too. So we have time for one question before everyone gets a much needed stretch and some caffeine of your choice. I will thank you, Asim Sood, in the front row for those of you joining us virtually.
Okay, I want to ask you, what will you advise a client who has the following question? There's an experiment happening in India wherein if you own a mobile phone, you're being offered free subscription to pro models of LLMs by all the major LLM providers. As a result, even if I'm buying a car, so this is a real case wherein somebody wanted to buy a Honda SUV, and they asked these three LLMs the question, which SUV is better, Hondas, Kias, or Hyundais? And all three LLMs said Hyundai and Kia is better than the Honda SUV that was in question. Now the client turned back and asked, we are a measurement company, we were only able to tell them this is what the models are saying. If you were asked a question like this, what can the client do now?
Thank you, Asim, for stumping the panel before we put them off on their break.
I mean, the answer is do more PR, do more SEO. Like, it's not going to change overnight. The models aren't going to update overnight. You know, anyone who says they can just drop a bomb and it'll change the results you're getting back overnight is a liar. Oops, strong language. So do more PR, do more SEO.
Yeah, on more channels as well, because every LLM picks from different channels. We see now Google prefers, YouTube, other prefers Reddit. But also, again, going back to the methodology, LLMs have a funny way of ranking things, and if you change your question slightly, the result is wildly different. So I would want to see the methodology before giving you a proper answer.
Yeah, I would question the validity of the data. Because as we know, LLMs respond differently to different audiences. So can you slice the data in a different way for an audience that actually wants to buy a Honda versus a different car? And then, to Giuseppe's point, the amount of tokens in a prompt can change the way that the model responds. So I think it's just about showing rigor and robustness in the way that you...
Yeah. It's going down to the framework that we need to develop on our prompt.
Yeah, I would agree. I would just the first question I would ask is, how many times did you ask the question to the models? Like, did you ask it once and get one result? Ask it again and you get another one, and start with there. I think it's difficult. I think the way that the results are presented are with like a lot of authority, and so I think that can scare clients and people that are using the content. I think it's just a case of working with them to understand this is actually how these models work, and it's probably not as much to be afraid of as you might initially think. I think about it in the same way as, like, we've all seen negative coverage. It's very different to being like a small bot automated website versus on the front page of the FT. You treat those two different things differently. I think it's the same case here, where it's too early to say how much influence it's had, so it's too early to kind of go into panic modes and just stick with the experimentation.
Can I add something super quick, just to be helpful?
Of course you can.
I think like the thing that I would be most worried about, less than the ranking, is more like, obviously all the tools now give us what sources are being cited, what URLs. If their PR efforts are not there, if their website is not there, that would be more worrying than the ranking itself, I would say. Then, because obviously the way you prompt can change the ranking, but the sources are there, they should be there. So if that is the case, probably they need to change something in the website, in the way LLMs can read it. They need to change something in their copy when they do media, when they do activations, when they do certain things. Sorry.
I like the bravery of Giuseppe to add something else, knowing that he's in between all of you and a coffee break. So well done, well done. No fear, lead on.
Flashing timer.
Which is already red. It's super red and flashing.
And I think we can all agree that there is still a lot of bias that we're trying to deconstruct from all of the models. But this is also very biased input. But I would like to thank PR Agency 1, Ketchum, Hotwire, and Burson for giving us this great discussion. Round of applause for everybody on the stage, please.